How are we?
We're we're live.
How are we?
Good. We're good. We're live, Carlos.
Okay. Just want to make sure that we're all set here. And good morning, America. How are you? Today is a special show because we are commemorating the 4th of July. And we're not going to really talk as much politics as usual, but it's going to be the same crowd. Robert Knorr, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. It's a great day.
Todd, how are you?
Happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence Day to you, too. So, I want to start off by talking about someone I met this week, and by all accounts, it's a normal American, and just mid-50s, uh, lived here all his life, born here, and we got into a discussion of politics a little bit, not a lot, but he said something that stuck with me and motivated the reason why I think we needed to have this show today. So he was talking about the fact that he didn't believe that we had any rights. We don't have any rights. We don't have any rights for anything. All we have is privileges, and we can lose those privileges at any time. That's what he said. And as he kept talking, um, I didn't really talk to him about if he voted or if he was involved politically or if he even believed in any type of political ideology. But it dawned on me that he doesn't really understand that, or he didn't really understand that we have rights, that they're not privileges, that they're God given. He didn't understand that. And if he didn't understand that, how many people really understand that? How many people really understand what the word inalienable means with respect to their right of free speech and their right to assemble and their right to religion and to choose the religion and to choose how to worship and to have the right to carry and bear arms and to have the right not to incriminate yourself and to have the right that the police need paper. They call it paper in the business. A warrant to come into your house just because they're nice people and he's such a nice man, I let him in. No, you don't have to. You have that right. And people don't really understand that these rights exist. They think that they're privileges. And the thing that struck me was that he said, and you can lose them at any time. He really totally, completely thought that what he thought were privileges, which are really rights, that you could lose them at any time. Now, of course, my friend Robert will tell you that, judging from the last 3 months, he might be right. So today, I talked to Todd and I talked to Rob, and I figured that we can talk for 2 hours about the reasons why we love America. And it's not designed for us to persuade you or convince you. It's designed for you to reflect on where you stand. See, that's the beauty of our country. You decide what's best for you, not us, you. Ask us anything, but don't tell us a damn thing. So with that, I would like to kick it to Robert and Todd quickly for their opening statements, and then I'd like to be able to play a video that Rob did that I think is one of the most glorious 7 minutes of video with respect to what it means to be an American that I've ever seen. And I've, in the last year, have grown to love Robert Knorr as my brother. And that video chokes me up. And I hope that it'll make you think. But first, to the great Todd Bartley.
Again, Carlos and Rob, happy Independence Day, and let's not allow this day to be lost on everybody with hot dogs and fireworks. Okay, this is a sacred day in our nation's history. It's Independence Day, right? And we've heard so much lately about how there's systemic racism and oppression going on in this country. Let's not forget about what today means. It's the founding of our country. It's Independence Day from British tyranny. And think about this for a minute, folks. We've brought it full circle because now the country that was left, right, Great Britain, is one of America's greatest allies when it comes to most any topic of conversation. And I'll give you an example. It's the fight on terrorism. They're one of our greatest allies, British intelligence, that whole situation. So the founders of this country, and we'll get into this in great depth over the next 2 hours, left tyranny and oppression to found the greatest country on the planet. Does it have flaws? Without question. We work through them day in, day out, and Robert and Carlos and I will guide you through there, and as we learn on a daily basis. But to say that this country is systemically racist and full of oppression is offensive to me. This country was founded because it left oppression and tyranny and founded on freedom. Founded on freedom. That was a guiding principle of the founding of this nation, was freedom. Individual freedom. Whether it's freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. It's freedoms, yours. As Carlos said in the beginning, it's your decision. And with that, I defer my time to Robert Knorr. Happy Independence Day, my friend.
Thank you. Also my birthday. How about that, right, Carlos?
I forgot. It's Robert's birthday. You just can't make this up. So,
a patriot born on the best day for patriots.
On the best, right? Born on the 4th of July.
I'm honored. Yeah.
With all due respect to Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
But so, how's your morning going so far, birthday boy?
Great. I ate more cake than I should have this morning, but that's okay. No, it's fantastic.
What flavor?
So my aunt makes chocolate with peanut butter frosting. It's
we'll
unbelievable.
Right over.
Unbelievable. So I'm buzzing a little with the sugar here. What I think about on this day is human history is dark and depressing. What we came from, when you go back to the earliest recording history, is dark. It's terrible. Life is scary. It's hard. Our history's replete with mankind, men and women and people of all colors, struggling against nature, struggling against each other, struggling within themselves. The United States of America and the founding fathers created something that was more than a country. It was an ideal. It was the shining city on the hill. It was the idea that everyone was created equal, that we all have personal liberty and personal responsibility. It was an experiment so great and an idea so great that ever since it, people from around the world have sought to come to this place, to aspire to it, to base their countries or their lives off of it. We, on this day, need to step back and remember that's what this country is. It's that ideal. It's freedom. It's the idea that you as an individual matter. It's an idea that we could come together despite differences of ethnicity, despite differences of religion, of political values, and we could celebrate humanity and the idea that all of us matter and that we all have individual rights to speak, to freedom, to defend ourselves. And that because we all celebrate those rights, despite the rest of our differences, we could come together to ensure the greatest experiment humanity's ever had. I sometimes, and like Todd said, we'll get into this later, specifically with the Founding Fathers, but I often wonder when it's my time to go through the pearly gates and I see the Founding Fathers, what will I say to them? What did I do in my time to protect this great experiment, the greatest in human history that they laid forth? And I only hope that on a day like today that we're doing our part to remember their greatness, to remember those ideals, and to do what we can to represent them in current day.
I would like to thank you, Rob and Todd. I would like to try to play a video through our share screen, and let me know if you guys can hear it. So, because if you guys can hear it, then everybody can hear it. And here we go. Let me know if you guys can hear it. Can we hear it?
No.
Currently, no audio.
Okay. Let's see if we can change some settings here. But you could see the video, right?
Yep.
Yes. And again, this is technology on the fly in 2020 during COVID-19 and the pandemic.
Okay. Let me know. Can you hear me now?
No.
We can hear you, but not the video.
Okay, let me try that again. How about now?
No.
Still no audio.
Okay, I'm going to try one more trick. I don't think we're going to be able to hear the video.
I might be able to get it up
Through
later.
Screen share, unless you have any other ideas, Todd.
Not at present. I will troubleshoot on this end.
Yeah, because I have the video up on screen share, and I can hear it. I can hear the whole entire video, but I don't believe you guys can. And if you guys can't, no one else can.
That is correct.
Now, the only other thing that I can think of is if someone plays it through their phone and puts it on, but
I could do that if you want.
my thoughts are, as you troubleshoot that, why don't you maybe give us an overview, Rob, of what the video said?
Sure. So the video's talking about.
You're on. You're on mute.
1 second. Yeah, sure. And I can play it through my phone, and it should work fine if you want. But
yeah, why don't you try doing that?
Okay.
Before you
Let me know
doing
if you guys can hear this, and hopefully it works.
Yeah.
States of America is the greatest country in the history of the world.
Okay.
Our founding fathers understood that what makes a country great, it isn't necessarily its land, it's not its wealth, but it's the people that reside within it. No time in history before them had there been a constitution or a legal document set forth to govern a nation that relied on the individual and personal freedom and personal responsibility. That is the ideology that made the United States great and continues to make it great. But as we go forward, we see that that's changing. We stand on the shoulders of giants, whether it be educators in the past, whether it be our forefathers, whether it be our veterans that fought and died for our great country, whether it be mothers or fathers that raised generations of great children, whether it be entrepreneurs that created jobs, whether it be the slaves that were freed and went on to become successful and do their own job to prove that if they were left alone, they too could succeed. Those ideas of personal freedom and personal responsibility and the great ancestors we have before us have made us what we are today. We don't want to be the generation that lets that slide. Today we see that it's been going on for decades, that normal Americans and their personal freedom and responsibility has slowly eroded away. This is because all of our cultural institutions of power are dominated by the establishment, and particularly an establishment leftist ideology. This means that things like hard work and personal responsibility have been replaced with things such as victimhood and claiming that you're perpetually a victim and that's somehow worth something. A normal American works 9 to 5 and they just want to be left alone by the government. I've grown up in rural Pennsylvania my whole life. The people that I respect, the people I think are the salt of this country, are blue-collar workers that I see every day, my family and friends. Whether they be truck drivers, welders, they hunt for recreation and for a livelihood. Whether it be carpenters, whether it be educators or people in the service industry. These people just want to go to work, provide for their family, have a good life, and be left alone. Where is their voice? They've been drowned out amongst a chorus of the establishment left that controls all of our cultural institutions of power that shape the public narrative. Whether it be the mainstream media, which comes almost 95% from the establishment leftist perspective. The same is true of academia. The same is true of our entertainment industry in Hollywood. And you could also say that of the people that control Silicon Valley and many of these social media corporations. Imagine it. You work 9 to 5, you come home, want to relax, you turn on your local news. All of the information you get is from this establishment leftist perspective. So you turn the news off and maybe you get ready for your night class that you're taking. That academia is almost entirely coming from that establishment leftist perspective. So you say, you know what, I just want to forget about it all and tune on some television, something entertaining. So you turn on a late night comedy show. All of it's dominated by the exact same ideology, this establishment leftist perspective. So then maybe you go onto Facebook or Twitter or YouTube in order to talk to people that maybe share your life experience. But again, those are all ran by organizations and companies that come from that same establishment leftist perspective. And make no mistake about it, this isn't the leftist that's my friend or my neighbor that I'm talking about. These are oligarchs. These are people in the establishment, the deep state, or whatever you want to call it, that are really the movers and shakers and control the direction of our country. They don't care about normal Americans. The idea that it's left versus right, sure, there are things we disagree on, and I'm honest in this channel that I'm coming from the right. But I welcome my friends from the left that understand also that this corruption in the establishment needs to be fought. Until we fight back against this corruption, it doesn't matter if we're Democrats, Republicans, none of it will matter. Because the people that really control this country don't care about me and yours voice. The election of Donald Trump was the first time in my life that we see the possibility of outing the corruption of this establishment. And yet, and despite this, we see that the establishment is laughing. They think that they're still winning. People like James Comey that ran the FBI as a personal mercenary squad for the Democrats and Barack Obama laugh as they escape indictment after indictment, even as their crimes are made public for all to see. The media covers for them and celebrates this corruption. Academia and the entertainment industry in Silicon Valley go along with this. Where are the voices for normal Americans? But there is good news. There are people that are rising up. There are people that are running for office. There are people that are doing independent channels. There are people waking up by the millions that understand how corrupt this system is. Just the Iowa caucus starts to show many people on the left that didn't want to see it how corrupt the DNC and the establishment is. We should be reaching out and talking to all these people and making allies to fight back against this corruption. My channel is about being a voice for normal Americans. Whether you're a blue-collar worker in rural Pennsylvania that's been maligned as clinging to your guns and Bible, that's been called a racist deplorable, or maybe you're in the inner city and you grew up in a single-parent household and you've been told you're a victim your whole life and you're just trying to succeed, but everything tells you, no, you're a victim. Don't try to go out and have personal responsibility and achieve on your own. Or anyone in between. This is a show for you. We are here to discuss the issues of normal Americans, to bring truth to everyday people that it's been hidden from by the oligarchs that really control our country and the establishment. They need to control the flow of information and all of those cultural institutions of power that I mentioned in order to make sure that they can pass their agenda, because they know the secret. If the normal person, if the average American were to find out how corrupt this was, they wouldn't stand for it. The way we win this battle is by bringing information to the millions and millions of Americans that have been lied to, that through the sweat of their labor, through their hard work, have enriched corrupt politicians, have enriched corrupt people in the media and other corrupt people that aren't elected to office like these bureaucrats, that have outsourced our wealth to other countries to further enrich the politicians that send that wealth over there. If the average and normal American wakes up to this, we can begin taking back our country. The war will be fought with information. That is what my channel and so many of the channels I'm associated are trying to do. That's what we're trying to do today. So please, I encourage you, follow my channel, support it, follow other independent content creators, follow the people that I'm connected to, and even if you're on the left, follow independent content creators on the left. But take away this gatekeeping power of the establishment to control all flow of information. Real people with facts and truth on their side do not hide from the First Amendment. We don't hide from open speech and open debate. We'll bring diverse opinions on. We'll bring people that disagree because we understand that we're about the flow of information and allowing everyone to make up their own mind. We do not need to censor voices like the establishment. So I welcome to my channel, the Normal America channel, and I hope that you'll enjoy yourself. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good one. Yeah, that's the end of it. So I made that months ago, and I think it's more true than ever today. We could see how this establishment is more than ever, more in my lifetime, blatantly discussing how much they hate this. Trump's speech was fantastic. Yeah.
Just make sure all your connections are connected.
I got it. Yeah, but Trump's speech last night was fantastic, and even
we're going to get to it.
You know, they're blatantly. It was dark. It was divisive. What's dark and divisive? Defending this country. Yeah. I mean, that's how bad things have gotten.
So, here's the opening salvo of us talking about why we love America. So, my opening story, this man that I met this week, you had to be there. He literally doesn't believe that we have any rights, and my interpretation of it was that he really was afraid of the government and they can come and take this away at any time. That's really what he thought, and that's really what he believed. And you know, he could sit there and say probably to a certain extent that the rhetoric that people like us, you know, put out, where it's a free country and you can do what you want. He could probably say things like that, but I don't really think he really believes them when the rubber hits the road. Do you find that in a lot of people that you talk to, Todd?
That they don't feel that they have rights?
That they're not really completely attuned to what their rights really are. I mean, we talk about it all the time, but there's a reason why people don't vote, right? It's a lack of trust. It's a lack of the conveyance of the ideas that the forefathers gave us that are well, certainly contravened by governors in the last 3 months, but aren't staples in the pablum of politicians talking about why we need to have these things read at the surface and that they be understood that we have these rights and we have these also, like Rob's video said, it's not enough to have the individual rights, and the individual freedom. You need the responsibility that goes with it.
So I've been doing some research this week on a story that'll be published this Independence Day weekend. And it was in regard to elections, as you're mentioning, Carlos. And what was staggering to find out is we have this right to vote, this ability to vote, to control the power in this country. It's given, right? We give power to the elected officials with the power of a vote. Yes?
We're the sovereign.
All agree?
Right.
Okay.
We're the sovereign, and we give the representatives the consent to rule. We can't rule, but they do.
So our country, and I would argue more than any country on the planet, has spilled blood and treasure all over the globe in the preservation of freedom and also trying to attain freedom for others on the globe, right? And now they have free elections. Okay. So where I'm going with this is I came across the percentage number of voter turnout from this past election. Would either one of you like to take a guess and let me tell me what percentage?
Less than 30%.
Yeah.
Easily.
It's 36.5% of the electorate turned out to cast a ballot.
Yeah, but usually it's in the late 20s, like 27 or 28, 29. No,
right,
it's
36.5%.
It's crazy.
36.5%. So roughly less than 4 in every 10 Lycoming County citizens cast a ballot last November. And yet every time the taxes go up, and yet every time one of their civil liberties is deprived, and every time they're told to wear a mask, they're going sideways.
So what does that mean to you in terms of why the numbers?
10 didn't even realize they had the right to vote, apparently, because they didn't show up.
So why do you think that is?
Because they don't care. They've been so brainwashed or have given up to the point they're not even going to go cast a ballot. No matter what I do, no matter what my vote, it's just not going to matter to me.
It's not going to matter, right? And there's no trust. Your thoughts, Rob?
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head. The part that everyone likes to talk about their rights and their freedoms, and as we should, and we should celebrate them on this day. But you also have to realize that that comes with the other side of the coin, which is personal responsibility. And what we've seen is a constant drumbeat by people that despise this country and have controlled our institutions, or at least they despise the people in this country, where they've told you, you don't have personal responsibility. They've preached the message of communism and socialism. Leave the state take control of you. You don't need to work on your behalf. We saw that the Green New Deal said, we'll pay people even that don't feel like working. That's what this is about. Once you start to adapt this idea and you say, I don't have personal responsibility. Look at the situation we have with Black Lives Matter. It is a message, those like Governor Tom Wolf that are preaching, there are two Pennsylvanians. One Pennsylvania for whites and one's for blacks. What he's really saying is, black community, anytime that something negative happens in your life, it's not your fault. It's outside pressures. You don't have the personal responsibility. It is the responsibility of the state. And once you drumbeat that into people's heads for so long, they start to accept this bargain. And it's the bargain of the over-endearing mother that says, listen, my child, never go out, never achieve. I'll take care of you. Right. Give up your rights. Give up your liberty. Give up your individuality. And I'll take care of everything. That's why we're seeing so many people that don't understand the importance of voting, the importance of practicing their rights, because they've taken this Faustian bargain where it's, as long as I just remain silent and as long as I let the government do what they want and take care of me, then I don't have to worry about my personal responsibility. And I think that the way we start to get this country back in the institutions that run it is to start to accept we don't need a leader. All of us as individuals have the personal responsibility to live up to the ideals set forth by the Founding Fathers. And if we all start doing that as individuals, then we will see that as a country, as a collective, we start to get back to the freedom that was intended by the Founding Fathers.
And I guess that would be a really great time, with all due respect to the people who have suffered in places like Baltimore, regarding what you just said. We're going to take care of you. No, it's a lie. If you could kindly, Robert, maybe start with the beginning of the Declaration of Independence.
I would love to. And you want me to read till we get to the charges? Got it.
Till the 17th.
Got it.
And what I will do is I will put it up on the screen because I'm that type of guy.
All right.
How's that?
So I'll start off. Yes. So I got my own thing I'm reading. So this was in Congress, July 4th, 1776. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station in which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the rights of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate the governments long established should not be changed for the light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object evinces as designed to reduce under the absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having direct object the establishment of the absolute tyranny over the states. To prove this, let the facts be submitted to a candid world.
And that first part is the declaration as to what the colonies intended. And here are the reasons why. There were 17 of them. The word he refers to the King of Great Britain, King George III. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless these people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness his invasions on the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such disillusions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise. The state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states for the purpose obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond the seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument of introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments, for suspending our own legislatures, and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, destroyed the lives of our people. He is at the time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, tyranny, and already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrection among us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. Todd?
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We've reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We've appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we've conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the restitute of our intentions due in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free in independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
So that last line gets me every time. And for the sake of standing up for our own state of Pennsylvania, the representatives that signed the Declaration of Independence from the state of Pennsylvania are as follows: Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, and George Ross. Robert, what kind of man, given this, so put me in the room in your mind. He receives the Declaration and he reads it. He had to read it twice, especially the 17 charges against him, before he even thought of anything. He must have been shell-shocked. But he wasn't surprised, right?
I put it like this. You try to draw from your own life and what can analogous seem like it could have been the situation back then. I think that he was probably like the elites we see today that feel that they're above natural law. They feel that they are almost a separate species from the rest of just the normal people. And so he was probably incessant. How dare these people? How dare people demand that they have some God-given rights? I control their rights. They must come to me. They must worship me. That's how they will get along. And so I would imagine that he was incessant, that he felt that these people that were so beneath him, they didn't warrant recognition, had the gall to write something like this to him, to stand up to him and demand that they be treated as equals and as people with unalienable rights. And so I would guess that just like when we see our elites, we see the people in Washington that refuse to listen to us, or we see the elites in Hollywood, you could tell by the way they talk. Go back to, for example, Bernie Sanders. He's called out for being a socialist that owns 3 houses. He says, oh, the third is a modest lake house. It's $500,000 home. He doesn't understand. He doesn't get the grievances, and it's not just unique to him. There's people of all sides of the aisle that this is true of. They don't get the grievances of the average person. And so they're insulted when people would say, we demand to be treated with our God-given rights. They are insulted, and they view you as merely an enemy to be crushed. And so that's my feelings of what King George probably thought when he read this.
So let's bring this home. The king wasn't listening to our grievances. Parallel that to what's happening in Pennsylvania today with the governor not listening to our, and I wouldn't even call them grievances, but shouldn't there be, from the strict point of view of what the Declaration of Independence and the document means, shouldn't there have been, why can't there be more discussion in the legislature about the ongoing problems like we had back in 1776? Today, tell us what the parallel is with respect to what's happening in Pennsylvania and the governor today, and parallel that to King George III and the United States of America.
I'm guessing that question's to me.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So every step of the way, and we just had the Pennsylvania Supreme Court hand down a 4-3 ruling earlier this week to affirm the governor's powers for the emergency declaration. And what has occurred at every step of the way to this point is every time an equal branch of government has tried to assert its power, namely the legislature, they have been usurped by the governor's power and the judicial branch of government in the courts. Why? Politically driven. There's an advantage on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and we saw that play out earlier this week, where you had one Democrat judge dissent from the majority. That's why it ended up 4-3 instead of 5-2, because the advantage was 5-2. So it ends up being 4-3 in favor of the governor. If we take it back to 1776 and this declaration, the same grievances, the 17 charges, I thought you were reading something from today.
Right. Well, the most pointed one, if you can permit me to repeat it, is this one. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers, and that's the closest one of the charges. But the complete contravening, I guess is the best word, the complete contravening of laws that exist here in this country right now, and the complete denial that there should be a discussion. We didn't even have a discussion, which is what he's doing by not listening to the legislature. And as our guest last week said, there was never any conversation from the governor's office with anyone else. It was just the governor's office deciding for us. In your experience, you can ask us anything, but you can't tell us anything because of the consent part of, how our system is set up. How do you think the governor views our grievances with respect to this? Through literally the lens of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and what the Declaration has laid out. What in your mind is the very best argument that he has to be able to subvert and contravene the Constitution and the laws of the state of Pennsylvania?
So he's using his pen as a sword, if you will. I know that may be a tough one for a lot of people in the audience to pick up, but he's using his pen as a sword and his Secretary of Health as the shield. Is it making sense of the analogy? Because every time he wants to go into battle, he puts the shield out first. There's an order from the Secretary of Health because it's a public health crisis. And then, oh, by the way, I'm going to use my unusurpable sword of the pen and tell you, you have to wear a mask.
Right.
Don't leave your house without a mask. It's socially unacceptable, but we're not going to fine you. We're not going to take you to jail. But if you reopen your business, we are going to fine you. I mean, Carlos, you mentioned it earlier, and we'll bring Rob back in here to the conversation as well. I mean, this is literally history rewriting itself from 1776 as we sit in 2020 here in the Commonwealth.
What is the difference, though, Rob, between the electorate and the sovereign today and the sovereign then?
We've gone through years of complacency. We have one of the lessons of King George for tyrants would be as follows. To immediately take away the rights of the people, as King George did, will lead to patriots standing up to you. But if you do it year after year after year, if you infiltrate institutions that aren't elected officials, such as the institutions of cultural power, the media, academia, we see it with the entertainment industry, with Silicon Valley, then that gives you cover, as Todd was saying, is like the shield for you to then be able to chip away at the rights. And so the average person's became complacent. They don't know what to think. They've been suffered small indignities their whole life that have been growing and growing and growing. And so now, when we're at a point where it would have been unthinkable 10 years ago for a governor to tell you that you don't have the right to peaceably assemble. And, this is just Pennsylvania. We've seen governors.
Specific people don't have the right.
Based on their political ideology.
Right.
Some people, if they favor the political party and ideology of the leaders, they're allowed to do what they want. But the laws are there, or in this case, not even laws, orders are there for the people that politically disagree with the leader. We've seen some leaders, such as Governor Murphy in New Jersey, forbade the attendance of church. Could there be a more direct violation of the First Amendment?
I was never thinking of the Bill of Rights.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what he said.
I never thought of the Bill of Rights when I was thinking of these things.
And they feel that they could get away with this because they feel that they're better than you. They feel.
To be honest, to be fair, let's be fair. Honestly, how tuned in do you think any politician is with respect to what these documents say? Honestly, let's be fair. When he said, it was shocking to me, but when he said, I never even considered the Bill of Rights when I was doing this, the whole religious
shutting down churches, right?
It was either shutting down churches or limiting the amount. And I want to say that it was specifically with respect to them congregating in parks. Does that sound right? Were they congregating in parks? They weren't congregating in churches. They went out and congregated in parks. But the most important aspect, beyond the fact that he said that he didn't consider the Bill of Rights, is that he said he surveilled them. He surveilled them. We surveilled them throughout the entire state, and we saw that they were gathering with a lot of people from a lot of out-of-state plates. You did what? Now, that's a whole nother show. The surveilling part, the surveilling religious people, okay? Which I think actually Governor de Blasio has a better claim on how to subjugate religious people, okay? But I have to take him at his word. I never considered that the Bill of Rights was something that I should think about. That's pretty much standard fare with all politicians, right?
Well, I think that what you see is...
My dog Han says that he agrees.
I agree. He agrees, yeah. They don't feel it necessary, right? Because go back to Obama.
Before you say that, do you really think they know anything about these things?
Well, no, but they don't feel it. Here's why they don't feel it necessary. They don't care. Go back to Obama. Obama assumed he knew best. That's why when they said we're going to pass Obamacare, we had to lie to people to get what's in it. They don't mind being hypocrites and breaking laws outlined and just taking away our rights that were outlined in the Bill of Rights. They don't mind it because they feel we know better than you. We know what to do. We deserve the ultimate power. The foundational documents, we don't even have to look into them. Who cares what they said? Tom Wolf, exist right now.
Antiquated.
That's right. I exist right now. I know what's best for this state. I'll do what I want. Or Murphy in the case of this conversation we're talking about now. And then when someone says, but where do you get these powers from? Where do you get the right to take away other people's rights, such as in the Bill of Rights? And he says, I never even considered where I get those rights from. I just do. I just have the right.
And if you see the video, listen, he wasn't being cynical.
No.
He was being honest. Tucker, I never considered it. I never considered the Bill of Rights. It was so honest. It wasn't like he was being coy or he was defending himself. It was just, no, we never even considered that.
And look at how this is analogous and how this filters down to the regular person. How many conversations have you had with just regular individuals that said, if you wanted to go to your job, you were killing grandma and were spreading COVID. But if you wanted to go out with hundreds of thousands and protest for Black Lives Matter, perfectly fine. It's that same mentality that says, we don't have to hold ourselves to any standard at all. We know better than you. Our priorities come first. And if you don't like it, tough. You don't have right. And I think your friend that you were talking to this with, this is maybe what he's referencing. When you allow a governor through executive fiat to strip away the rights guaranteed to you with nary a whimper, people just accepted it out of fear. Then you have to question, are these rights still rights that we hold dear? Are they rights that the people... Now, me, Todd, and you, we will defend these rights. We understand these rights. But they are taken away. They're chipped at over and over and over. And now we're at the point where they're at the bone, where they're hitting the nerve, where they've finally taken the rights away so much that they could blatantly do it. And the people that are doing it, I'm not even saying that Murphy and Todd Wolf are sitting around like, we're evil, we're just trying to abuse people. They legitimately happen to be very unimpressive, unintelligent people who think that they know more than you and that only their opinions matter. And so they're not going to be bothered by something like the law. They're not going to be bothered by the foundational principles of this country and the rights that were outlined to you in the Declaration and in the Bill of Rights. They don't care because they think, who are these old crusty men that created these documents? Oh, I know more than them anyways. No need to look into what they were doing. And it's a terrible mistake that so many people have forgotten their history and how these men that came up with these documents that we just talked about in the Declaration are some of the most impressive and intelligent men in the history of this world.
Yeah, Robert, I don't disagree, but here's what I'll say, and see if you guys can also put this together. Being in the room with the governor and having him bring General Counsel Schwab with him to defend the position, I would posit to you that the reason that the governor did not have a conversation with the legislature is he's not running the state. It's General Counsel Schwab and the pact of lawyers that are in the 6, 7, 8 states that we've talked about. The Governor Wolf went with Governor Cuomo and New Jersey's governor, and that whole pack. Those lawyers are the ones that are trying to rewrite the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, state constitutions. And the reason that I say that is every time I ask those questions, and one of them was immediate injunctive relief, you'd have thought I found out what the governor's homework was. Because the look on his face and Schwab's face was, wait a minute, you're not supposed to know that yet. How dare you?
Yep.
Well, and since you're there in front of them, isn't this really more about the fact that because of the virus and because of the situations that it created, that it was because they reacted the way that they reacted? It wasn't because they were trying to be un-American. It's because they just didn't know what to do.
Have you noticed what's happened since the press conferences in person have ended? Have you noticed what's happened? Universal masking, this rule, that rule, this next thing you have to do. And by the way, we've won at the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, so we're going to do whatever we want to do whenever we want to do it. And oh, by the way, we're not telling you when the next press conference is. Have you noticed what's going on when they're unchallenged?
Yes, they rule autocratically. So this is the type of stuff that people say, and this is the type of stuff that people do.
Oh, by the way, there's 12 additional cases here in Lycoming County, and we're roughly a month removed from the peaceful protests in downtown Williamsport. You think it might have had anything to do with that, Carlos and Rob?
Oh, no, I've been...
A dozen cases today and 3 a day the last week. That it has a 2-week incubation period?
I've been assured by the experts that no. COVID's a very intelligent virus. It only goes after people that, are conservative leaning. If you want to go out and mass gather to support Black Lives Matter, it can't affect you. I've been reliably told that by expert after expert. Just turn into your mainstream media. They'll tell you. It's utter nonsense. And look, here's the thing. These declarations that are coming from Wolf, and I think you're right, that it is people behind the scenes. It's unelected bureaucrats or lawyers in this case that are coming
Deep
up with
state.
these. Yeah, it is
Deep
the deep
state.
state. That's exactly what I was getting to. This is the problem we see also at the national level. And in that little video that I did earlier that we played, it's something that I tell my friends on the left all the time. It doesn't matter what your issue is, right? If there are people that you didn't vote for that are running things behind the scenes, then your vote doesn't matter. And that's exactly what we're seeing just here in Pennsylvania. You could remove Tom Wolf. He could be impeached tomorrow. Do you think that would change the orders that we see coming from the office of government? Of course not.
Regardless of party,
right?
Apparently. So when we're talking about, and I don't believe this is personally a right. I was having a discussion on Facebook where I asked, why does the governor not want to have a discussion with the legislature about our concerns? And in the conversation, as the comments filtered, someone said, you have to wear a mask because it's the only way to protect people. Because if you have the virus and you're asymptomatic and you don't know it and you wear a mask, then you keep the virus to yourself and it doesn't affect other people.
Wrong.
Valuable feedback. Listen, it's valuable feedback, but there's a couple of questions that I have. You've changed your mind in the state of Pennsylvania alone 3 different times. What are we supposed to believe? Three times you've changed your minds on masks alone. You've changed your mind. So why should we trust the experts and the science when the science is at best shaky? Now, don't get me wrong. Listen, for all the crap that I talk about being an individual and following the founders' plans and their values, I wear a mask. It's sort of like a Pascal's wager thing. I don't believe them, but it's cost me nothing to wear a mask. Plus, I'm 60. Okay, very good looking for 60. But I've had rheumatic fever twice, and I'm a diabetic. Okay, don't be stupid. Okay, you can ask me, but don't tell me. That's my position. So when you say false, Todd, what else beyond the fact that they won't discuss it and the science is shaky makes you say that statement?
Because there's no scientific basis that wearing a mask is going to stop the virus. There's nothing out there that says that. If that were true,
even if you have it asymptomatically and you don't know it, and it catches your own germs from hitting other people, 2 questions: is that viable? 3 questions actually. Do we really know exactly how it's transmitted? And what part of the Constitution says that you have to do things to protect other people versus protecting yourself?
So
Are these valid questions, do you think?
The medical folks that I'm talking to say you have a better chance of developing a breathing issue or something else to go on with the respiratory issue of rebreathing your own air by wearing a tight-fitting mask than you do of contracting COVID.
Repeat that again.
You have a better chance by rebreathing your own air and your own emissions than you do of catching COVID. Like, if you didn't have a breathing issue before, you didn't have a respiratory issue before, and you slap a mask on a 95-degree day, and you start rebreathing that and rebreathing your sweat and everything else, you got a good chance of gagging or vomiting or suffocating yourself by wearing a mask.
But the governor is not actually addressing that issue. That's a separate issue.
They said when you leave your house, you need to wear a mask. So that means from your door to your car, you have to wear a mask. In your car, and I can't believe I'm seeing this more than I'm not seeing it, People are driving around wearing masks. Driving. Have you lost your minds?
Well,
you can pass out.
What's the pushback on the fact that we don't trust the CDC, Rob?
Well, I said this for a moment, let's assume that the masks are a good idea and the social distancing was a good idea and that those are actually things we could be doing. I don't necessarily believe this, but let's assume for a minute that it's true.
And you're in home healthcare, by the way.
Right. So, okay. So if this is true, anytime you need a large group of people, in this case, the population of the United States of America, to voluntarily impede some of their rights, you need them to buy into it. You cannot, through the threat of force of the police, tell everyone that you will enforce something like this and have it be effective. And the reason is we just don't have enough police. And so the way that this becomes effective is that you educate people and you show them the correct way to do things. Then you don't have to force them. They voluntarily comply. The problem is when we have leaders and experts that either continue to flip-flop and change their mind or allow exemptions to the very orders that they put forth based on political ideology, people stop having faith in those institutions, correctly, by the way. And so, for example, let's take Governor Wolf. Let's assume for a minute, and this is going to be a big leap of faith for me, let's assume that Governor Wolf meant well, and that he and his mask orders and his social distancing orders saying that you couldn't have large gatherings, let's assume that he meant well and he legitimately thought that was necessary to get us through COVID. How in the world did he think then it was a good idea for him to violate his own order to march with Black Lives Matter and get a photo op next to a photo that says Blue Lives Murder? How did he think that was a good idea? How are you going to convince... Look, Americans and Pennsylvanians are great people. They're willing to make sacrifices for the greater good. That's true. And so there were people, even though I was immediately against the lockdowns, there were people that said, you know what, if I have to sacrifice my well-being short term for the well-being of this country and others, I'll do it. But how can you expect people to lose their jobs, lose their livelihoods, to not be able to go to funerals of people that passed away, to not have weddings, to not see their friends and family? All of this stuff, how can you ask them to make those sacrifices while the very person demanding you make that sacrifice says, of course, this doesn't apply to me. This doesn't apply to the people that politically align with me. We can do what we want, but you need to keep wearing that mask. You need to keep not going to your place of work. It's anathema to everything the United States is about. And it is, when you read those charges in the Declaration, you can start to feel this is what our founding fathers were experiencing. They were experiencing, they even put, like, one of the parts I love is where they say, let me read it again here real quick. Right? They're not doing this flippantly. This is what they say. They say, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, their duty to throw off such government. They're not doing this flippantly. Like, everyone understands that. They did it. It was the last step. The Declaration of Independence was the last step. They talk repeatedly. We petitioned King George for these grievances, and every time it was met with injury. That's what we see happening with so many of these governors and Tom Wolf. We keep saying, but wait a minute. Remember, Tom Wolf, not only did he violate his own executive order and just say, yeah, you're right, I did it, who cares? He also then proceeded, he didn't say, hey, I understand, you want to go to your job, you want to end this lockdown, I get it, but please, for the sake of this state, we have to keep doing it. He didn't say that, did he? He said, you're a coward. We'll take away your license to operate a business. We'll take away your CARES Act funding. He wants to punish you if you have this exact same idea that he had, that for me and my personal beliefs and my personal well-being, I would like to not adhere to this order. He thinks you should be punished and you're a coward. But as soon as it was him, as soon as it was politically expedient for him, he said, I don't have to stand by my own order. I'll go out and march with a crowd of over 500 people. And then when Todd asks him, he just says, yeah, you're right. I guess that was hypocritical. Anyways, next question.
But there was a lot of votes there for me.
Right? And that's what it is.
So what's wrong, Todd? What's wrong with asking? Here's what I mean. At some point, what I'm about to say was true. At some point. So let's make believe I'm the governor. And I'd like to address the people of Pennsylvania. As you all know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. The experts tell us that countrywide, there will be more than 2 million deaths. Many will suffer. So I will not shut down the state. I will continue to have everything stay as it is, except I will protect the elderly, because there's evidence that if we protect the elderly, they're the ones that are being affected the most. But every single citizen of the state of Pennsylvania must do what they think is the right thing to do to protect themselves from dying, because there's supposed to be over 2 million deaths. You know what to do and how best to safeguard your life. These are our recommendations. At some point, that was true, correct, Todd? And what was wrong with saying that?
Because it was not politically convenient to say that.
Define to me what convenient means in this case.
Politically convenient?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So for the people, I know what you mean, but someone out there might not understand what you mean.
So it's so much easier if you take Carlos's premise that 2 million people are going to die to shut down.
That's what the expert said at one point, correct?
Right. And it's an expert. They're an expert in the field. We have science that backs it up. We have these studies from this, that, and the other place. Keep in mind, they're not telling you what the background of the study is or what they're inputting to get the output of the study. But that's another story for another day. But it's going to be safe for us to shut down the entire state, even though Sullivan County has 0 to 2 cases in 12 weeks. We're going to shut down the entire state because Philadelphia is off the chart with cases and the collar counties around Philly. We're going to shut down the entire state. So instead of doing the deep dive on the numbers to see that the elderly were disproportionately affected by the virus and nursing homes were incubation centers for the virus with no escape, instead of taking people out of there, they sent people back in.
So, but I don't want to get in off the road here. I want to be able to stay on the road of what was wrong with the governor saying what I just said.
Because he couldn't. Why? If he took that narrow of an X-Acto knife to this problem, the power that he's exerted over the last 3 months wouldn't be there right now.
So you're saying that they took a pandemic virus and they used it for political gain. That's what you're saying. What is your first and most?
We were always going to get to universal masking because I asked the question, how many months is it going to take? How long are we going to take? Because they let it slip in one of the first early press conferences that I asked. And Secretary Levine said, well, we need a 2-month window. 2 months came and went, right?
Yeah, but she doesn't run the state. The governor does. What I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to get at is to try to get people to understand what the motives really were. What is the most important motive of not doing what Carlos Saldivia just play acted as governor? What is the most important motive to not do what I said, Rob?
Well, if I'm being as charitable as possible to the other side, they would say because the risk was such that millions could die, so therefore we couldn't leave it up to people to willingly comply. There had to be executive fiat to force people to comply. That's right, what they would say.
So what the truth doesn't matter anymore.
Well, they would say we didn't know the truth.
Correct.
That is true, that it doesn't matter. But they would say we didn't know the truth. In the case now, there isn't. Look, Carlos, you're preaching to the choir. I said this initially. I said, what We have to triage, or by triage, I mean you have to go after the biggest threat first. What was the biggest threat when COVID came along? I said, will COVID end the United States? No. No matter how bad it will be, we will survive. Will the economic depression that will come about as a result of a lockout end the United States? No. It'll be worse than COVID, but it might take 10 years to get over, but we'll get over it. But you know what the United States can accept? That its people willfully allow their rights to be taken away based on an unknown fear. And if we set this precedent, every time the government says there is a threat, therefore we must strip you of your rights, we have shown that the people of this country will accept that. You already see Dr. Fauci talking about next year's swine flu. You already see the climate change people saying, oh, we need to declare an emergency and strip people of their rights in the name of fighting climate change. And so that's what this is about. And the other thing is this. Understand that people like Governor Wolf and the people behind the scenes that are running him, they believe that they know better than everyone else. When you give people power, they seek to wield that power for whatever their motivations are, even if it's well-intended motivations. When you give someone a sledgehammer, that's what they're going to use to solve every problem. So instead of people like me and you, if we were in charge saying, we view things through the lens of the foundational documents of this country outlined exactly how to get through unknown situations. The Bill of Rights is the best blueprint for how to deal with threats to this country, whatever they may be, disease, or maybe they're the threat of an outside invader. All of that is best outlined how to deal with that in our Constitution and Bill of Rights. But when you solve everything by saying, we need more government power. Does this sound familiar? Is this starting to sound like socialism? Oh, the government will take care of everything. Once you embrace that ideology, then more government action is the answer to everything. And so Tom Wolf and the people running him, it's anathema to everything they believe. That you would say, we'll do our best to protect the vulnerable population, but we ask Pennsylvanians to do what's right and educate themselves and do what's best for themselves. They believe that that's the complete opposite. We just have fundamental differences. They think that they should have all the power. By the way, the irony, of course, is they don't think the other side should have any of the power. So they could commit all of these abuses and all of these authoritarian measures, yet at the same time, when Trump tries to do something small, they're like, authoritarian dictator, right? So that's the irony. Us, we don't want to be hypocrites. We say limited government power for all sides, right? And that's how you know who's correct in this debate, because we're not advocating for hypocrisy that says our side should have all the power and be able to strip people of their rights, but the other side should have none.
Well, what I at 12:19, a couple of things I want to start to shorten our answers because we have a lot to get through, and I want to focus on looking through the lens of what the people that are listening to us should be doing, and the answer to that question, based on what the governor said and based on what I posited, is that it is our job not to trust them. It is our job to hold them accountable. It's not hate, it's accountability. And I remember as clear as day, the very first press conference. Remember, Todd, in Lycoming County, when the Lycoming County Sheriff said that he had studied this pandemic and it reminded him of polio and the Spanish flu. When you make statements like that, you really aren't following and looking through the lens of the Bill of Rights, are you? You are playing Vegas odds maker and scaring people. And do the numbers say that it was the Spanish flu or polio?
No.
So why do you think they say that? To cover their ass. That's the reflexive, standing still position of most elected officials, because they don't know the Constitution. They don't know the Bill of Rights. They don't know how to solve problems, and we pay for it. That's the message we're sending. So if we're going to pay, then we need to be able to get more educated on exactly how we read that bill that they gave us, how we read that receipt that they submit. We need to get stronger at being able to understand the rights that we have, not think that they can be taken away at any point because they really aren't rights, they're privileges. That's the point. And that's what we're trying to, convey here.
Right.
Can I give you one before we transition? Can I give you one, Carlos, to that point?
Sure, of course.
So from 1776 to 2020 in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, it took a pandemic and a governor acting as a king, okay, an analogy, for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to come down to tell the legislature, in order for you to rein in the governor, aka the king, you have to pass an additional law if this ever happens again to usurp his power. That's what they said in the ruling. You have to do additional legislative work to rein him in when it comes to emergency declarations. Are you kidding me? We didn't know any better since 1776 to 2020?
And the Republicans are inept. Many of them, right? And there are some that are fighting back against this, don't be mistaken. But Carlos makes the point there. Why are they allowing this to... Let's assume for a moment that the Republicans want to fight back against this. Why are they silent? Because they are afraid...
They don't know what to do.
Well, not only do they not know what to do, but because politics is downstream of culture. And they are scared to death that someone could point the finger at them and say, this death's on you. Right? It's not, the culture right now is dominated by people that don't value your Bill of Rights. They don't value it. And so there is no fear in crushing your Bill of Rights who's going to come down on you that has an institutional voice. But if you don't give in to the stripping of those rights and then someone dies of COVID, you're responsible for the death. It's the exact same with the Black Lives Matter protest. If that's why they're silent or they're just letting it go. You don't want to be called a racist because the cultural institutions are dominated by people that will do that. And so we see that the Republicans cower and they say, we will allow the other side to be dictators, to be kings, and we'll be silent. Now, granted, they filed this court hearing, but we need to do more than that. It's clear in Pennsylvania that our Supreme Court is not going to give a fair shake. And like Todd correctly points out better than I can, they're quite literally endorsing the fact that the legislative branch is worthless, that the executive branch in Pennsylvania could do whatever they want, and the legislative branch is just there to get a paycheck.
Right. I know you wanted to talk about posterity, Rob.
Yeah.
You had a quote you wanted to go through. Why don't you do that?
Sure. Let me bring it up here. So I don't have the exact date on this, but this is from John Adams. He says, posterity. You will never know how much it costs the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it. If you do not, I shall repent in heaven that I ever I took half the pains to preserve it. And what John Adams is saying there is, in the future, you'll have no idea how much we sacrificed, our generation of the founding fathers, in order to create this experiment, to create this ideal that we talked about at the beginning of the show, of the greatest country in the history of Earth, a country that said you have personal freedom and personal responsibility, and that all men are created equal. You have no idea the pains that they went through to be able to achieve that, the personal sacrifices. And if you fail, if you ignore that and you allow this experiment to fail, then John Adams says, I will feel pain that I even partook in such an experiment. Because imagine the sacrifices to you, your loved ones, to your way of being, in order to set forth an experiment that they knew. Like, understand this. The British Empire was the most powerful empire in the world at that point. And for 50-something odd men to sign a document saying, we're basically declaring war against you, do you think that they were like, well, we'll probably be safe? Their heads were on the chopping block. They put themselves, what do we talk about all the time, Carlos? It's easy to say the right things when there's no risk to you. But when there's risk to you, that's when it matters. It's easy to stand up and say, oh, I'm a conservative when there's no risk. But when you could lose your job if you fight back against the narrative of the Marxist fascist Black Lives Matter movement, that's when it matters. And so I think that that's the quote I wanted to think about today, is that what am I doing? What are each of us doing as individuals to live up to that standard? That these men that sacrifice more than we can imagine, that they put their lives and their families' lives on the line just so that we can have freedom. What are we doing to live up to that? And that's what I focus on today.
Well, when you talk about the forefathers, there's two lines in the Declaration of Independence that I think about. They were not, okay. These people were not. If they were caught, if any of them were caught, because they were looking for them, there were spies that kind of knew that they were doing this. So one of the charges against the king is for protecting them being the military, by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states. So you have to think to yourself, if you go to the very last line of the Declaration of Independence, it says, and I quote, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." If they got caught, they would have been executed on the street as they stood. Isn't that correct, Todd?
Yes. And it
And
would not have been pretty, by the way, how they would have been executed.
juxtapose that with what's happening today in our culture of not murdering you per se, but isn't that what cancel culture is basically murdering everything except your personal body, Robert?
Yeah. It's eliminating ideas that are opposed to the dominant orthodoxy, right? And that's what King George would have. The execution of the founding fathers wouldn't have been just about personal revenge, though certainly that would have been part of it with King George, but it would have been about silencing the idea. And what was the idea? That we were all created equal, that we did not have to suffer abuses from a self-proclaimed king, right? That was the idea that he would have been silencing. That's the idea that's attempting to be silenced today. Though the king isn't a monarch that we could see literally. The king is the people that control these cultural institutions. And so therefore, if you challenge those institutions, you will be silenced. You will be canceled. And so it's very similar. Not by no means am I likening myself to the founding fathers. That's not what I'm trying to do. But what I am saying is that the tactics of the tyrants, although they may have changed in the physical oppression literally used, though we may see a turn to that in the near future, more physical violence enacted on you, the strategy is this very same: to silence anyone who dissents from you, to not engage in debate with them, and to make sure that they don't have a voice and they're fearful to speak up in public, else they be canceled.
So I wanted to share this with you. This is from yesterday's Mount Rushmore speech by the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Our people have a great memory. They will never forget the destruction of statues and monuments to George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, abolitionists, and many others. The violent mayhem we have seen in the streets and cities that are run by liberal Democrats in every case is the predictable result of years of extreme indoctrination and bias in education, journalism, and other cultural institutions. Against every law of society and nature, our children are taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes, but that they were villains. Just so you know, that line is going to go down in history as one of the greatest things he's ever said. The radical view of American history is a web of lies. All perspective is removed. Every virtue is obscured. Every motive is twisted. Every fact is distorted. And every flaw is magnified until the history is purged and the record is disfigured beyond all recognition. This movement is openly attacking the legacies of every person on Rushmore. They defiled the memory of George Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Roosevelt. Today, we will set history and history's record straight. Before these figures were immortalized in stone, they were American giants in full flesh and blood, gallant men whose intrepid deeds unleashed the greatest leap of human advancement the world has ever known. Tonight, I will tell you, and most importantly, the youth of our nation, the true stories of these great men. From head to toe, George Washington represented the strength, grace, and dignity of the American people. From a small volunteer force of citizen farmers, he created the Continental Army out of nothing and rallied them to stand against the most powerful military on earth. Through 8 long years, through the brutal winter of Valley Forge, through setback after setback of the field of battle, he led those patriots to ultimate triumph. When the army had dwindled to a few thousand men at Christmas of 1776, when defeat seemed absolutely certain, he took what remained of his forces on a daring nighttime crossing of the Delaware River. They marched through the 9 miles of frigid darkness, many without boots on their feet, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. In the morning, they seized victory at Trenton, where forcing the surrender of the most powerful empire on the planet at Yorktown. General Washington did not claim power, but simply returned to Mount Vernon as a private citizen. When called upon again, he presided over the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia and was unanimously elected our first president. When he stepped down after 2 terms, his former adversary, King George, called him, quote, the greatest man of the age. The greatest man of the age. He remains first in our hearts to this day. For as long as Americans love this land, we will honor and cherish the father of our country, George Washington. He will never be removed, abolished, and most of all, he will never be forgotten. Thomas Jefferson, the great Thomas Jefferson, was 33 years old when he traveled north to Pennsylvania and brilliantly authored one of the greatest treasures of human history, the Declaration of Independence. He also drafted Virginia's Constitution and conceived and wrote the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, a model for our cherished First Amendment. After serving as the first Secretary of State and then Vice President, he was elected to the presidency. He ordered American warriors to crush Barbary pirates. He doubled the size of our nation with the Louisiana Purchase, and he sent the famous explorers Lewis and Clark into the West on a daring expedition to the Pacific Ocean. He was an architect, an inventor, a diplomat, a scholar, the founder of one of the world's greatest universities, and an ardent defender of liberty. Americans will forever admire the author of American freedom, Thomas Jefferson. He too will never, ever be abandoned by us. Abraham Lincoln, the savior of our nation, was a self-taught country lawyer who grew up in a log cabin on the American frontier. The first Republican president, he rose to high office from obscurity based on the force and clarity of his anti-slavery convictions. Very, very strong convictions. He signed the law that built the Transcontinental Railroad. He signed the Homestead Act, given to some incredible scholars as simply defined ordinary citizens free land to settle anywhere in the American West. And he led the country through the darkest hours of American history, given every ounce of strength that he had to ensure that government of the people, by the people, and for the people did not perish from this earth. He served as commander-in-chief in the United States forces during the bloodiest war, the struggle that saved our nation and extinguished the evil of slavery. Over 600,000 died in that war. More than 20,000 were killed or wounded in a single day at Antietam. At Gettysburg, 157 years ago, the Union bravely withstood an assault of nearly 15,000 men and threw back Pickett's charge. Lincoln won the Civil War. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. He led the passage of the 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery for all time, and ultimately his determination to preserve our nation and our Union cost him his life. For as long as we live, Americans will uphold and revere the immortal memory of President Abraham Lincoln. Theodore Roosevelt exemplified the unbridled confidence of our nation, of our national culture and identity. He saw the towering grandeur of America's mission in the world and pursued it with overwhelming energy and zeal. As a lieutenant colonel during the Spanish-American War, he led the famous Rough Riders to defeat the enemy at San Juan Hill. He cleaned up corruption as police commissioner of New York City. Then he served as governor of New York, vice president, and at 42 years old became the youngest president of the United States. He sent out our great new naval fleet around the globe to announce America's survival as a world power. He gave us many of our national parks, including Grand Canyon. He oversaw the construction of the awe-inspiring Panama Canal, and he is the only person ever awarded the Nobel Peace Prize and the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was American freedom personified in full. The American people will never relinquish the bold, beautiful, and untamed spirit of Theodore Roosevelt. No movement that seeks to dismantle these treasured American legacies can possibly have a love of America at its heart. Can't happen. No person who remains quiet at the destruction of this resplendent heritage can possibly lead us to a better future. The radical ideology attacking our country advances under the banner of social justice, but in truth, it would demolish both justice and society. It would transform justice into an instrument of division and vengeance, and it would turn our free and inclusive society into a place of repression, domination, and exclusion. They want to silence us, but we will not be silenced. Todd, thoughts?
I think the president hit every note, and I want to go back to Lincoln for just a second. Do you think for one moment that the folks that decided to deface the Lincoln Memorial had any idea who in the hell Abraham Lincoln was or is before they decided to do that? The man paid the ultimate price for ending slavery. He died for it. Mm-hmm. And you're defacing him in the name of Black Lives Matter? I'm sorry, but in the history of our nation, the poster guy for Black Lives Matter would arguably be Abraham Lincoln.
Right. So there are some truths that are evident, aren't they, Rob? And here's the fact. We can talk about our rights and these beautiful documents and these beautiful men who did this for us. But reason is not the answer in responding to what's happening today, is it?
No, it's
not reason.
We have to fight.
They don't care about reason, right? This is about ultimately force and arms, isn't it?
Yeah. When terrorists seek to destroy your country, you cannot reason with the terror. Now, look, I still talk to people I'm not talking, when I say this, about my friends on the left that are being misled by this movement. I'll still talk to them. I'll still do my best to reach the people that could be reached. But certainly we need leaders, and we need the use of force to get back into defending this country. Now, who gets to use that use of force? The use of force should be our government. And God bless Donald Trump for that speech last night. Finally, Look, Trump's not perfect. I've criticized him. All of us have on things. But finally, we have a leader that is willing to say, this is the greatest country in the history of the world. I will defend this country. We are tired of these people destroying our history and claiming that our country is bad.
Defending.
We won't take it anymore.
Yeah, you froze for about 35, 40 seconds.
Oh.
Can you just repeat that real quick?
Yeah, we need... You could still, I'm not suggesting that we don't talk to people on the left. That's not what I'm saying. But the people that are running this movement are terrorists, are communist, fascist, globalists that seek to destroy this country, and that we need the proper government use of force to be able to deal with this. Period. And God bless Donald Trump for finally being a leader, as one that I've criticized at times, but this speech yesterday is exactly what this country needed, where he said, I've correctly isolated what this problem is. It is people using all of these cultural institutions who hate this country, who hate the history of this country, and we must fight back. And for saying that, and in part what you just read there, the great presidents that are on Mount Rushmore, how did the New York Times describe that speech? Dark, divisive. How'd the Democrats describe it? The same. This is the nature of the people we are up against. To defend the great history of the greatest country in the history of the world is considered dark and divisive. They want to destroy it with impunity. And if Republicans have any sense at all, they will get on board with Trump and start protecting this country and demanding that these terrorists, these globalist, fascist, Marxists, be taken out of these positions of cultural institutions of power.
I know that we want to get to you and the governor, Todd, but I have a question. I have a question for you first. The people that defend Black Lives Matters, which is a Marxist organization bent on destroying this country, just read their manifesto. It's not a declaration. It's not a proclamation. It's a manifesto. That should be the very first signal that this isn't about equanimity. This is about power. Manifesto. Aren't the people that defend them betraying our country also? And as magnanimous as Rob wants to be in talking to these people, it's still a betrayal.
So many of the people that are participating in protests and marches and everything else and chanting, the BLM slogan haven't gotten past the slogan. Right. They haven't read the manifesto. They don't know what's behind the curtain. And then they're chanting these things that they have no context of, right? Mm-hmm. And then they take it to a level, and you've mentioned, Rob and Carlos, the systemic nature of this in the culture, and I'll just use education as an example. We have a local school district that's now codified the fact that they are historically and systemically racist.
Without giving any evidence.
Very cogent question of, can you give me at least one example? And we're still waiting on an answer.
One, it's systemic. It has to be spilling out of your mouth, right? Give me one. One example of systemic racism.
Here's the issue, and it's going to come up in this weekend's story. That Jennifer Lake is not wrong. That the Williamsport Area School District has been embroiled in litigation in recent years, proving, in fact, that from years ago there's a tendency. But they didn't pay the settlement. Another local nonprofit organization ended up paying the settlement, even though the program was run on the Williamsport Area School District property. But that's for another story for another day.
Well, my question is, how long do you maintain a conversation with someone and make believe that it's a serious conversation when these people don't care about any reason at all? All of this is about emotion. And like
great
you said,
point, Carlos. And then I'm going to come to Rob.
Like you said, that's that's the best thing I've heard since the Floyd murder, the Floyd killing. They can't get past the slogan.
Jennifer Lake, school board member, Williamsport Area School District, told everybody in a meeting and then codified it that the Williamsport Area School District is systemically racist. And by default, she called everybody in Lycoming County racist. Okay? I've done 2 stories so far on Jennifer Lake. I've done a deep dive for the better part of a week to 10 days on Jennifer Lake. And she doesn't want to have a conversation, Carlos and Rob. She wants to tell you what you're supposed to think because she's deemed it appropriate that we're all racist.
Right. So why should we have a conversation with her?
Jen, I'd like to have the conversation. Would you at least respond to an email or a phone call? Oh, that's right. Neither can Mayor Slaughter, who's a former Williamsport Area School District employee. Did he leave because the school district is systemically racist? Is that why he left to become the mayor?
Rob, make your best case as to why we should talk to these people.
Because we have principle. And if we don't, how can we criticize the other side for saying we're going to censor Todd, Carlos, and Rob? We're not going to talk to them. Who are we to criticize them if we engage in the same behavior? If we say we refuse to talk to others? And the other thing we have to understand is there is, like Todd said, if we just say anyone endorsing Black Lives Matter, we shouldn't talk with them. But understand the vast majority of people just believe that slogan. Our audience isn't just the people that we're directly engaging with or debating. Our audience is all of the people in the center that are listening as well. And if we join in the behavior of the other side, then we have made actual violent conflict inevitable. When we refuse to have dialogue, we make violence inevitable. And so I will keep speaking to people, even if I suspect they're arguing in bad faith, because there are people watching that show, look at how Carlos, Rob, and Todd are willing to have discussions. They don't need to censor the other side. They can allow the other side to speak their mind because they have the facts on their sides, because they are the righteous. If we start to say, no, we refuse to talk to Jennifer Lake, I would talk to Jennifer Lake today, right now, if she called into the show. I would never say, she's a bad faith actor, I'm not going to talk to her, be done. Because as soon as we say that, Jennifer Lake will then come out and say, that proves that I'm on the right side of this. I wanted to discuss this with these gentlemen, but they said, no, we refuse to discuss it with you because they're afraid of me. So that's why I have these conversations.
Rob, now I want you to clarify a point real quick on the violence side. You're not advocating violence. I want everybody to understand that he's not advocating violence, but it is a historical fact with what you said. When the conversations don't happen and people stop talking, that's when it goes sideways. It's historically proven from the inception of time.
That's right. And that's exactly why I'm speaking up, right? Because here's what's going to happen. Here's what they're pushing us for. They want to take away your right to defend yourself. They want to take away the police. They want to take away your voice. And then when you're backed in that corner and you're forced to try to defend yourself, like that couple in St. Louis, what do? They use the very force of law that they claim to be against to crack down on you. And so if we are not in the discussion, if we are not engaged in dialogue, what you've done is you've put people in the position where they will have no choice but to use violence to solve their disagreements. And I'm against that as strong as we could be. That's why it's important to have these conversations.
Well, no question about it. And that's the first thing that happens. Violence is the first thing that happens when their white guilt runs out. The first thing. All those people that they're standing up for, all those people that they're social justice warrioring for, they will turn on them when their white guilt runs out. That's what happens. My question is, Rob and Todd, for the average person, the guy that I talked to this week, who thinks that all your rights and privileges can be taken away at any time, is how long do we have this stupid conversation with us having our principles and us being spit on and taken advantage of? How long do we wait to have this conversation? It's a fair question. No,
Rob, let me take us and then walk right into where I'm going to leave you with it. Jennifer Lake.
12:51, and
I'll be quick.
Final statements. Yep.
Jennifer Lake was banking on the fact that the Williamsport way is once we tell you here's how it's going to be, you keep your mouth shut and you go along for the ride. She was banking on it.
Yeah.
And the governor, by the way, has just issued a statement today saying by wearing a mask gives you more freedom. Are you kidding me?
It's Orwellian, right? This is remember what he said. You remember the truth is a lie. This is straight out of 1984. You're a coward if you want to go out and reopen the state. So if you're not so fearful of the virus that you're staying shivering in the fetal position in your basement at home, if you're not doing that, you're the coward. That's how ridiculous this is. They literally invert language. You're a fascist if you're against Antifa using fascist tactics. If you care about Black lives and understand that the core statement of Black Lives Matter, such as defunding the police or ending the nuclear family, are the very worst things for the Black community, well, then you hate Black people. That's how insane this is. They control this language and the narrative, and it's despicable. It really is.
How long do we wait in fulfilling what you would call our principles in trying to have a conversation?
We don't. We do it now. Well, I mean, that's
no. But how long do you wait?
Never. I mean, I guess I'm not waiting. I never have waited, and no one should ever wait.
How long do we wait for them to engage in having a conversation with us? If what you're saying, and listen, and I agree, in principle, I agree. If you know better, you have to do better. So we'll try to have the conversation. How long do you wait?
I don't understand the question. I mean,
have an authentic, legitimate conversation when they're throwing rocks and we're trying to have a conversation.
You don't. So, the people that are using violence,
open, and if they don't want to respond, that's their problem.
That's right. The people that are engaged in violence are no longer part of the discussion. But I'm not going to, my friends that think that they're somehow noble by endorsing the slogan of Black Lives Matter, I can't bring myself to say, sorry. I mean, Carlos, to me, this would be the exact same thing as you voted for Trump, I never want to talk to you again. How do we come together as a country if that's occurring?
But gentlemen, let me ask you this question. Is the reason they're not responding is their position is so indefensible they can't respond? Just a hypothetical.
Well, that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. The worse your arguments are, the more you need calls for censorship. So how bad do you think the argument of cancel culture is?
But so given that information, okay, given the information that they don't want to have a conversation and they don't want to be honest.
Oh, no, they want to have a conversation. It's one way. Go ahead.
No. But for our readers or for our listeners and our viewers, what do we do then? You could encapsulate that as part of your closing statements, 2 minutes each.
Who do you want to start?
I love deferring to Rob to close it out. So if you don't mind.
Okay.
Doing the deep dive right now, having been called a racist by Jennifer Lake and told that the Williamsport Area School District has systemic racism, knowing there's an elephant in the room, which will be revealed later on as the Myrtle Beach story plays itself out over the next weeks and months, right? Doing the deep dive, there's a reason Jennifer Lake does not want to have a conversation. There are so many questions in regard to what she has publicly filed while running for office as a school board member. And most recently, 2019. I don't even have to go back to the first time she ran, 2015. There's so many inconsistencies in the documentation in 2019. I could write a book about it, which may end up happening over the next couple of weeks or months as they unfold. To reach out to somebody at least twice in writing and by phone and to be ignored tells you everything you need to know about Jennifer Lake and this entire argument. It's completely indefensible what they're telling you.
So how do we communicate with someone like that? Is my point.
Here's where I'm going.
I'm trying to give tools to the people who are reading, who are watching us. How do we give them the tools to effectively deal with someone like her?
So if you're going to call somebody a racist generically and they push back on you with facts and details of your own hand and your own writing and your own admissions and you're indefensible and then you don't respond, I got something for you. The story writes itself. Rob?
Yeah. I agree. And look, here's the tool you use. Never, first off, right? The most important thing in your life is your family and those connected to you. And you have to if there are people beyond the pale that are arguing for things that are insane, like destroying this country, using violence, then yeah, it's hard to have a conversation with them. But when you give up hope and you say, well, I'll no longer have a conversation with you based on my perceived interpretation of your political ideology, then we make violence inevitable and it will drive a wedge into this country. So the tools you could use is never allow anyone to call you something that you're not. You know what's in your heart. When these people say, oh, well, you're a Russian supporter, as someone's saying on Periscope right now of me, or that you are a racist, it's not true. And so you don't have to take those accusations seriously. You know what's in your heart and you know what the people around you know. It is time to fight back and to push back on this anti-American narrative, on this idea of Marxism in disguise and globalism in disguise that they're seeking to achieve. The way we do that is we show that we are on the correct side of history. Every time in history you see book burnings, you see attempts at censorship, that side is on the wrong side. I will not give in my principles to these people and advocate for censorship and the end of dialogue because they decided to reject those principles. I also understand that the people that are listening to these conversations, the way we ultimately win is this. The globalists, the people that hate this country, they win by keeping people uninformed. We win by informing people. And I understand that if I shut off these discussions and debates with people, even if they're arguing in bad faith, that the vast majority of people in this country that haven't taken a side will say there's no reason to be on the side of the people that are both seeking to censor the others. So I will not give up my principles. I will continue to defend what made this country great, the ideas of personal responsibility and freedom. I'll continue to defend the idea that all men are created equal. I'll continue to open myself up to dialogue and understand that people could change. And I'll be as forceful as possible with my intellect, with my words, and with my discussions in pushing back on this fascist narrative that's coming through that seeks to destroy our country.
That being said, that's a hard act to follow.
By the way, happy anniversary, Carlos, and happy birthday, Robert.
Thank you. Same happy anniversary, Carlos. Yeah.
So there are, humbly, I will share with you what my plan of attack in defending our country and manifesting the love that I have for this country and the opportunity that it has afforded me is. There's three core ideas. Idea number one, be better. Idea number two, get educated. Idea number three, do something. Be better. Be a better brother. Be a better father. Be a better son. Be a better husband. Be a better friend. Listen more. Observe your behavior and never look at what you do through the lens of you being a victim. You're not a victim. You were born in the greatest country on earth. You have rights and freedoms and friends and aspirations and desires and dreams. You must do better. Don't wait on anyone else to do that for you. Get educated. Read the Declaration of Independence. Hey, listen, we read it today. I know, it's a little obtuse. Go on YouTube. Search, what does the Declaration of Independence mean? And watch those videos. There's hundreds of explainer videos that are fantastic. Read the Federalist Papers. There's a lot of them. I know. They're long. But they inform you. And they provide a basis for you to have ideas that then you can implement yourself through those papers to be able to come to a defense and an understanding on your own 2 feet as to what they mean. Don't believe me or Rob or Todd. You decide for yourself what they mean to you. You see, all three of us, all three of us that are sitting here, we could go toe to toe with anybody in the country, including 44. President Obama, the constitutional attorney, in discussing our rights and the things we believe in. We are both, all three of us are strong on our feet in defending what this nation was, is, and is going to be. We've we've dedicated time to educate ourselves. It takes time to educate yourself on these things. That's why you have to read. The more reading you do, the stronger your convictions and your opinions will be formulated. And you don't even have to listen to us. You could just listen to yourself. And that's one of the most beautiful things about the Declaration of Independence and our formative papers that say that we trust you. You are the sovereign. It's not a king, it's not a legislature. You, the people, are the sovereign. You give consent to representatives to be able to rule. That's power. That's brilliance. But it requires you being educated to know immediately when someone is contravening or subjugating your own rights and what the Constitution and the Bill of Rights says. You stand on your own 2 feet and you defend yourself. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. And the third thing is do something. Get involved. Help someone. That's the easiest one to do. Many that know me, especially in the business world, know that I end most of my conversations with, is there anything I can do for you? I can't tell you how many times it's come back to bite me in the ass because people think that I'm saying that because I want something from them or I'm trying to push my business or I, you know, I don't have any competition. No one does what I do. No one thinks like me. No one acts like me. No one reacts like me. No one plots like me. No one prepares like me. I'm an individual. So when I tell you, is there anything I can do for you? I mean it. And all you got to do is take me up on it to see how prepared I am to be able to help you. That's the easiest thing you could possibly ever do for someone else is to help them, to ask them. That's how you can most easily get involved and do something. Ask, is there anything else or is there anything I can do for you? And then help them. Do it. Follow through. Finish well. If you love sports, I'll give you a perfect analogy. All the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the NFL are the quarterbacks who finished well. Are the quarterbacks who came back in the fourth quarter and won. Same thing in life. Help someone finish well. Follow your dreams and do something every single day. Do something to further your dreams because your dream might be the one dream that we're all counting on. Don't allow anybody else in this world to define who you are and what your limitations are. We decide, not them. It is a an unbelievable privilege to say that America gave me the greatest gift I've ever had in my life. And today, I will celebrate that. I hope that you do too. And I hope that the things that Robert and Todd and I said today are things that you can reflect on to help you stand on your own 2 feet, to be able to do what's best for you and your family. Have a great 4th of July. It is absolutely great to be alive today in America. We'll see you next week.